All right, welcome back to the Ottawa studios of Inside My Canoehead. I am your host, Dr. D. This is the 250th episode of the podcast. So grab yourself your favorite beverage. Come on, celebrate with us. All right, thanks again for joining us here this week at Inside My Canoehead. And we'll start off with, as we do every week, to thank you for your suggestions, your feedbacks, your comments, good, bad, or indifferent, that come in across our social media platforms and DMs, emails, and general, WTFs that you might want to send our way. We appreciate it. We read everyone. If you email us, we will answer you directly, irrespective of what you have to say. Thanks again. Welcome to episode 250. I can't begin to go in to how many percentages of podcasters never make it past 3, never make it past 20, never make it past a year. It's all about believing in the intent and the purpose of why we're here at Inside My Canoehead. And so today what we want to do is sit down, take you on a little journey, tell you about my story, tell you about the birth of Inside My Canoehead, the podcast, Preparedness Labs Incorporated, the company, the ideas, the strategy, the research, the education, and what the future has for this podcast as we take the time to reflect on the wonderful, incredible experience that we've had together for almost 4 years, the wonderful guests that we've had on, the topics that we've challenged, and the overall interest that we've brought to the idea of preparedness, the idea of personal responsibility, and the idea of rocking an incredible life in the middle of a crazy pandemic. So first about me, my name is Dr. D, a.k.a. Jeff. I am your host. I have been the host since the beginning. I spent a 28-year career in the Canadian Army as a logistician, beans, bullets, and gas. A couple overseas tours, ran around the deserts of Afghanistan chasing bad guys. I've lived in many different parts and traveled across this entire country of Canada. I've visited many Army installations for many different purposes throughout my career in the incredible warriors to the south in the United States of America. I've bled, fought, and teared alongside of them around the world, and I have, no matter what your country's going through, I have the most incredible respect for the American warrior ethos. So as an individual, I am an avid backcountry paddler, aka the name of the podcast, Inside My Canoehead. I'm an explorer. I'm a hunter. I'm a fisherman. I'm somebody who just, their Zen place, my Zen place, is found in the bush. It's found in the woods. It's found to the thundering sound of falling leaves. And those of you who have had the opportunity to go to a place where there is no ambient noise, but nature itself, it is incredible how loud nature can be in the most simplest of times. Paddling down a river and hearing the waterfall from a kilometer away, and the power of that is incredible. So I want to tell you the story, my journey, how I came from an Army logistician who was retiring after the end of a career to where I am now in this field and chasing these dreams. I'm just like you. I'm just somebody who's living their life on the face of this earth. I'm doing the things that I want to do. I'm on a journey. You're on a journey. I just want to have you follow me on this adventure. Let's chase our dreams and slay our dragons. So I retired in 2019 after 28 years with 3 very specific goals. I wanted to be a professor, which means I wanted to be an instructor on a university course. I wanted to be a published author, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur. When you're in the Army for 28 years, you're not doing much entrepreneurial stuff. In fact, you're doing absolutely nothing but what somebody else tells you to do. From your career to your courses to your postings, your locations, what the next initiative, what the next task you're on, all of that is determined by somebody other than you. When you do that for long enough, for decades, you look in the mirror and you want to try to entrepreneur. You want to see what carving that path looks like. All of that set up, really cool. Oops. a little friend dropped over from China in October and November of 2019, and in March of 2020, we had a pandemic declared. Now, my goal was something completely different. It was to finish the PhD that I started in 2017. My intent was to write a book about the subject that I was examining and studying, and then to start a business in the same area. I wasn't sure what the business would be. I wasn't even 100% certain what the book would be on, but I knew it would probably all flow from what I was studying in my PhD. It's just a natural, easy way to go. And then the pandemic dropped by. Nobody was ready. Incredible uncertainty. Everybody was caught off guard. Seemingly nobody was ready and good to go for this. And it came out that there was this incredible government dependency. Everybody immediately needed uncle or auntie government to come in and swoop in and save the day and rescue them. It was shocking to me. I had no idea society was in that condition. And so inside my Canoehead was born in April of 2020 from how can I help? How can I help the world and my listeners as it might hopefully at some day expand to where we're going to be, to help people out, to provide some level of information that is valuable to the general public that they can digest, that maybe some advice in there, some plans that they can follow to get themselves at least a better situated than they were before. So to figure out what to do, I thought it was pretty easy. You know what? I'm just going to go and check to see what is the government telling us to do, right? What is the government telling us that must be done? They were telling us to get kits together, emergency kits, to have plans, to stay informed. Essentially, the government was telling everybody to be a professional victim. Collect the basics to survive, huddle, and wait for further instructions. You know, the benevolent patriarchal government will tell you what to do next, right? Everybody defaulted to that situation, you know, until we didn't listen, until we wanted to congregate, until we decided that we wanted to be the ones who decided what risk we assumed, and we were told no, that the government knew what was acceptable and that we must become followers. We must shut her down and wait for life to return to normal. Stay a professional victim, huddle at home. Don't worry, we'll cut you magical checks in your bank account. Just sit there and wait for the world to return. However, there was a group of people who thrived in the pandemic, who were able to pivot. They had a plan, a strategy for significant shocks, whatever that may be. So what did they do differently than the rest of society? So I took these actions. I looked at everything the successful people do, and then we decided to put that together, and we created codified it, shall we say, into an education system, right? The lessons learned from the people that were successful in the pandemic, the people that thrived, the people that did exceptionally well under the pandemic imposed conditions by the government. What did they do differently? How can we help other people do the same thing immediately, or more likely for the next major shock? How do we help people get themselves in a position where the next time something significant happens, they're able to thrive, they're able to succeed? They're not going to be professional victims. They're not going to wait for the patriarchal benevolent government to tell them and advise them what to do. They are able to do it on their own. What do we do? So we launched Preparedness Labs Incorporated as a company in August of 2020 as an educational research firm. So a research firm that does research and continues the research into emergency preparedness and thriving in struggle. And then an education firm that takes that research, translate it into doable hunks, like edible chunks, as I like to refer to them in my writing, and that you can take and that you can eat and you can do this, and that by definition on its own will increase the likelihood that the next major thing that happens, you will be better off. That was August 2020. And the interesting part about this is, as I'm launching this at the same time I was doing my PhD now, and if ever you ever thought about doing higher education, a PhD is really just a 5-year personal project. Yeah, there's a couple of courses in the beginning like every university program, but really what's different about a PhD is that it's no harder than what you do in a master's thesis, right? And even from a structural perspective, it isn't that much different from what you might have done in a bachelor's degree in a major project in a bachelor's degree, right? It's testing the scientific method to a higher level of scrutiny and a broader depth as you get higher up in the educational platform. So really, basically, you do a year, you do 12 months of courses and examinations to make sure that you've passed everything and you know you need everything to do. And then you essentially do a 3-year personal project where you're on your own, right? Nobody cares. Nobody's calling you up. Nobody is checking in to make sure that you've got everything done and that deadlines are hit. You're on your own. And if you don't do anything, there'll be a few people periodically, maybe 6 months from now, and say, hey, Jeff, what's going on? What are you doing, bud? You're falling a little bit behind. But other than that, you have to be that type of person. So I'm doing that in the middle of a pandemic with all of the pressures that we so clearly remember. And on top of that, I'm trying to start this company to give people education, things that I'm learning through my research. How do I translate that? And so I wanted to take this time to talk about a very special human being. His name is Dr. Christopher Stoney. He was my academic supervisor, my second last academic supervisor. I had 3 of them. My first one left for an incredible job overseas. Don't blame him whatsoever. Chris took a risk on a veteran. And you have to remember that as a 46-year-old veteran of modern war, I don't fit the university demographic, right? Look at who's in university now. I don't fit it. I don't fit in. I had an idea that was different than what everybody was thinking about, right? Nobody was thinking about emergency preparedness communications. Remember, I'm doing all of this and setting this up before the pandemic happened, right? So I'm trying to tell people the importance of emergency preparedness communications and getting ready for significant exogenous shocks before the pandemic. Nobody cared. And this great guy, Chris Stoney, said, you know what? I'll take a risk on this guy. I'll take a risk on him. And Chris did. And Chris was the only one out of all of the faculty at the university who agreed to take me on board. And he did. And it's with his leadership that we got the project across the start line and started to begin. Unfortunately, I lost Chris to cancer in 2020. An incredible human being, an amazing man, struck down far, far too early in any of this. And for those of you that have lost a mentor unexpectedly, whether it be cancer or anything else, or whether like some I have on the battlefield, when you lose somebody who is such a strong presence in one of your major life events, it's pretty difficult. It's pretty challenging. And it took me a little bit and some walks in the park and some personal reflection to decide, do I carry on and do this? Well, as a warrior, my friends, and if you've ever been a warrior, you understand, I don't have the option of quitting. I don't have the option of shutting down. It's not built into my DNA. So luckily, I found somebody else who was on the team who decided to step up, and Paloma helped me get across the finish line to finish that. But it's tough. Real life journey has. So I'm doing all of that. I'm retired. I'm trying to figure all this out. I'm trying to build. I'm trying to help people out with Inside My Canoehead. And let me tell you, here's what it's like being a new podcaster, right? My first episode that came out, the channel introduction and the first episode that came out in April of 2020, I had 5 downloads. 4 of them were family members. To this day, somehow, I don't know how, I'm going to figure out a way to find out who that was, who that random human that collided with me on the internet and downloaded the podcast episode. 5. By May 2024, we were up to 27 6 downloads in the entire month. Wow, I was blown away. Okay, half of those were family, but now I went from one human being to 13 possible, up to 13 if they were all different human beings. And there was 4 episodes, so I could have been, maybe less than that. I could have been as low as 3. But I had human beings downloading my content, and somebody was coming back because I was getting the same village. I was getting the same town again. So somebody actually listened to my podcast episode twice. I had a listener. You don't know what that means when you're starting out something new, right? Joe Rogan's got millions. Simon Sinek has got millions. I mean, David Goggins jumps on a podcast episode and there's several 100,000 downloads. And I'm hopping around in my basement, high-fiving myself in the mirror because I got 3 humans. It's believing in the message and believing in the importance of the preparedness message and helping the world out and doing my part. The world, and I'm not going to go through all of the iterations that the world was going through and the different decisions the governments were making, but I want you to take a second and sit back and think and try to remember quite clearly what that was like. It was the feeling of uncertainty, the lack of control that bothered people, the idea that after all of the lessons learned in the pandemic, most don't feel better prepared to navigate the next crisis. We have a lower level of institutional trust due to a whole bunch of circumstances in the pandemic, and our stress and anxiety levels are increased over climate, disasters, economic, specifically inflation, pandemic 2.0, or pending World War III. The world seems an incredibly unstable place, a challenging place. And how do you raise a family? How do you chase your dreams when seriously you're just trying to stay above water? I get it. And this is the point, right? Here we are. Let's call it 4 years later after the pandemic. There's people who believe it was planned. There's people who believe it came from a lab in Wuhan, and there's some people believe that it was just this random fluke of nature. I don't care where you fall on that, but after everything our society has gone through, after all of the impositions of control by our governments and various different governments around the world, various different levels of intervention, various different levels of outcome, after all of that, at the macro level, at the population level, I'm going to argue with you that we are no better prepared for the next exogenous shock, whatever it may be, than we were in March of 2020 when the government said, welcome to 2 weeks to flatten the curve, right? Remember that phrase, 2 weeks to flatten the curve? It's apparently this week is the 4th year anniversary of 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And what did we do? Especially here in Canada, because we are a compliant population. We believed our government. We stayed home. You could have played ball hockey on the freeway. There was nobody out and about whatsoever, buddy. Everybody was home. Everybody was 6 feet apart. At the time, nobody was wearing masks because they were confused as heck on that messaging. But the point being is we were compliant because in the beginning, compliance works with fear. When you tout up all the fear-mongering and the potential danger, people become afraid. And people stay afraid until they learn. And once they start to learn, they start to push back against the statements that are being made. And if the statements being made are not subsequently backed up by some type of evidence or a logical analysis, and the answer society gets is, this is just what we're telling you to do, and this is what we're ordering, you start to create that chasm in institutional trust. And that has been growing and expanding for years in this society. And now we're in a position where I'm truly afraid that if there was a public health emergency, if there truly was something far more significant than a really bad flu, if it came along with a much higher hospitalization or death rate than COVID-19, the population is not going to listen to the public health advice. And they're not going to do that, not because they're dumb. It's because institutional trust has fallen. And it's because a lot of the arguments that were made in the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic have been shown now to be incorrect. And what people think that means is lying. No, science evolves. People said what they believed based upon the information they had at the time. And I think for the most part, I will back up any public health official that had the guts to go to a microphone and tell us what they thought. Because most of them, I would say the vast majority of them, were intentionally trying to do the right thing. They were trying to tell us based on what they understood. Because remember, the last major influenza-related pandemic or respiratory pandemic happened over 100 years ago, and all of the people that experienced that were dead, and the record keeping and the few studies we have were so incredibly horribly lacking in what we call scientific vigor today. They were just a guesswork. I mean, we don't have evidence of what happened in the Spanish flu. Nobody knows how many millions of people died. We know it started somewhere, and we know it was spread by the returning troops from World War I. We'll never know the number of deaths. We'll never know the death percentage. We'll never know any of that because those records didn't exist. And I would argue 100 years from now, folks won't know the record about we have now. But so here we are on my journey. I'm sitting here going, we've been at this 4 years. How do we persuade people? How do we persuade people that the current messaging they're getting is inadequate? How do we do that? Well, we think about it as a theoretical framework, and it sounds a little nerdy, but listen to me for a second, right? It's about seizing control of your life, to be responsible for your outcomes. It's the lens through which you design your life today, your plans, your strategy, your 1, 3, and 5 year medium-term goals. And we got a couple of great sayings around here that you will hear repeatedly on our episodes, that preparedness is a lifestyle. It is a stockpile. You cannot purchase your way to security. I don't care what you buy. I don't care what kit and equipment you acquire. You cannot buy your way to a state of preparedness. And preparedness is where the response fight is won. Because considering all of the stressors in this world, you don't know what's coming next. But by setting yourself and your family up for success, you put yourself in a position where you will have a higher degree of likelihood of a far better outcome than everybody else will around you. So when everybody's wandering around with their phones in the air, trying to get a signal, trying to figure out what's going on, trying to text around, you and your family are executing a well-understood plan. Everybody knows what they're doing. Nobody needs to yammer. Nobody needs to yap. Off they go. Everybody's doing what they need to do. That's the idea of adopting a prepared life. You are mitigating your exposure to these shocks. So you're mitigating your exposure to critical infrastructure. So when some element of our modern technologically enabled society takes a knee, it goes offline for a short period of time, you have a strategy to deal with that. You are less dependent on that. You are able to step up and take on whatever may happen. So here, what we're doing at Inside My Canoehead and Preparedness Labs Incorporated, looking forward to continue to be a service to you, to continue to provide you evidence-based information, research-based analysis, ideas that are based on exactly what I said before. What I'm telling you is my journey, the story and the things that I went through, my experiences, what I learned from them, and then I go talk to people who had exceptional results, right? So if you look at towns that were decimated by disasters, there are going to be a small group of people who do really, really well. Now, most people will jump out of the framework, and you're probably yelling at the speaker right now, it's the rich. Of course it's the rich. No, in fact, it's not. If you look at the research, again, evidence-based, not my opinion, but the evidence tells us It's not the rich that fare the best post-disaster. Not at all. In fact, it is the working poor. And that's classified as people who work, live paycheck to paycheck, but are fully employed and have a future. Those people and their families and their cultures and their societies and their relationships, they fare way better at the result of an event. So we look at those communities that do better, and we ask why. We go have a chat with them, we sit down with them, we figure it out. What did you do that nobody else did that led you to have a better outcome, right? And never once has it been, I had an emergency kit. Never once had been, I'm so glad I had my non-perishable food. In my work, I have sat back and read every report about every disaster that's happened in this country of Canada since the 1980s. Not once has one person died of starvation. Not one person has died of thirst. These people having perishable, sure, it may make life a little bit easier, but it doesn't lead to better post-event outcomes. It doesn't set you and your family up for success. Preparedness is not about stockpiles. And when you make that realization, and for most of our listeners and most of our customers and clients at Preparedness Labs Incorporated, where it ticks off is when we do what we call your trifecta of preparedness plans, right? We talk about your most likely and your most dangerous plan. So if you think about everything that could happen to you where you live, there's probably 75 different scenarios, right? You're not going to sit down and try to figure out 75 contingency plans for your family, right? You're not doing that. You're a nutcase if you try. So what we recommend here is you look at it as a continuum from the most likely, which is the least dangerous, to the least likely, which is the most dangerous, and you prepare for the event that is likely sitting right at either end of those spectrum. So if I'm ready for the easiest and the hardest, then by default, I'm ready for everything in the beginning, right? So we set that up, and what that looks like based upon research, again, evidence, not opinion, not what we think, but what we know is it's a power loss is the most likely. An evacuation on a short notice from your home is the most dangerous. Those are the two you prepare for, right? We have a third one. It's called the trifecta of preparedness. And that talks about income loss. That talks about what is your plan when you get fired. The grounding principle of the grounding event that happened to most people in the pandemic was not getting sick. Yes, some did. Many died. We all feel really bad about that. The most impactful event for the vast majority of the population at the macro level was the impact on income. People lost their jobs. Great people doing good work for healthy companies through no fault of their own were unemployed on a moment's notice. They weren't ready. They didn't have an emergency fund. They didn't have a strategic pivot plan to switch over to their next employment. All they could do was turtle on the couch and wait and hope and pray and whatever they wanted to do that this would all go away and life will return to normalcy. The people who excelled in the pandemic had a pivot plan. We teach people how to build that financial pivot plan. And when you open that door, people realize, preparedness is not about kit and equipment in my basement for power outages. Preparedness is about a lifestyle. It is about me getting ready for all of those things that are beyond my control. Preparedness is not about natural disasters and natural emergencies and man-made disasters. No, not at all. Preparedness is a way of life. It is a theoretical framework for saying, I have no idea what the world is going to throw at me, but I know it's my responsibility to take care of myself and the people for whom I'm responsible. And it's my responsibility to, as a leader, to navigate through whatever that may be and get my family, my organization, my community out the other end in as good a shape as they were before, if not thriving in the middle of chaos. And when people have that aha moment, that oh my bleep, when they realize preparedness is not about food and flashlights and first aid kits, right? That's a starting point to get people thinking. Preparedness is when you open that door and you realize, just when talking about income insecurity, you all of a sudden realize that, holy snappers, this is big. And then we take you on that journey. And that's what we're going to continue to do here, moving into season 10, which is coming up next week. We are going to launch into that. We're going to take you down that journey and bring you along with us as we talk about all the really interesting things that make up what preparedness is really about. It's that aha. It's not about kit and equipment in my basement. That is such a narrow viewpoint, very simplistic. And it's hard to do on radio, as they say, on a podcast, to try to express to you that smile on my face when I'm working with a client on Zoom and we're going through some issues, whatever it may be, and we get there and they have that aha moment going, and I'm like, this, my friend, this is how people succeeded in the pandemic. This is how, now, sick or not sick, a financial plan really did help you out with that, because if you had a strategic financial plan and you got COVID-19, a pretty significant bout of it, and you were out for 4 months, that's perfectly fine. You were well positioned for that. You had the funding set aside for that. You were able to take care of your family. Therefore, they could take care of you. We navigated out the other end of it. Everybody emerged. And oh, by the way, I lost my job. No worries. Sucks, don't get me wrong. But guess what I have? I have a pivot plan. I know that exactly the day that I get fired, I'm going to go to this job, this industry, this position. Or I'm going to go there, but I need 2 months of training. This is where I got to get the training. This is how I get the training. This is how I solicit for jobs. Do I do it as an independent? You figured all that out before you're fired, before the next event. That's preparedness. And when people realize that, it's a freaking amazing thing to see the look on their face and the damn ass smile, ear to ear grin when they realize that, yeah, you in fact can control everything, right? There's a great saying with Stoicism that I use all the time, is that you are in control of very little. And that is precisely all you need, right? That's all you need. You control what you say and what you do, and you control nothing else. You don't control any other human being's actions. You don't control what the government does. You don't control what other countries do. You don't control what international bodies are. If you live in a democracy, you have a vote. You have a say, not the final say. So your country may choose a leader and a political party that you find absolutely repulsive, but welcome to a democracy. You control so very exceptionally few things in this world, but that is precisely all you need. And when you start focusing inward on what you control, you create this incredible blanket of preparedness, we call it. A layer of insulation between you and the crazy that the world is. And all of a sudden, that 1 in 3 5-year plan that we show people how to do, it's actually achievable. Because now you've kicked out all this other BS, that's the noise that's going on, and you're on a strategic plan. That's what we're going to bring to you. That's what we're going to continue to do as we move into our 251st episode down the way. I'm going to end this episode with a bunch of thank yous. There are a lot of wonderful human beings that helped me get to this place where my company is successful and my podcast has 250 episodes. We have just shy of 12,000 downloads. We're downloaded in 59 countries and over 600 locations on 6 continents around the world. When it comes to specific stats, we are downloaded in 53 countries, with Canada making 49% of our downloads, 34% in the United States of America. Go Washington, go! And rounding out the top 10 are Germany, Kenya, United Kingdom, the Netherlands, the United Arab Emirates, France, Ireland, and Australia. We are on all 6 continents, with South America unfortunately being the lower one. with only a handful of downloads, but we are everywhere around the world with tens of thousands of downloads across 4 years and 250 episodes. We are available on every platform that you can imagine. This audio is now available as a feed on YouTube. So if you go to Preparedness Labs, you Google that on YouTube, you go there, and the Inside My Canoehead audio feed is up there. Buy Me a Coffee is available for those of you who want to contribute to this, who want to say thank you or want to say congratulations. Go over to www.insidemycanoehead.ca for our website dedicated specifically to this podcast. There's a methodology there for you to be able to donate a few bucks at me to buy me a nice, wonderful cup of coffee. And there's places there where you can leave reviews. You can tell us all about the episodes. You can follow us on social media, and you can suggest whatever you want. What would you like to see in the coming series? What would you like to see in the coming episodes? We usually start off the first 3 or 4 episodes in a season talking about a specific area, and then we let a lot of the feedback kind of drive where we want to go. We're going to be putting out some polls of what you would like to hear and what you would like to see. We'd love for you to drop over to www.insidemycanoehead.ca. Those will be up next week when we start season 10, and the thank yous. We got to thank, obviously, my number one, my best friend, my high school sweetheart, who believed in me when others thought it was a crazy idea to keep doing a podcast when only 7 human beings would take the time, yet I would spend an hour editing and trying to make it perfect and getting the ums and the ahs out of it. Never wavered in the dedication and support for me. I want to thank my daughter-in-law, because it was her that came up with the name Inside My Canoehead, because, you know, if you know me, I've got a big arse canoe guy tattooed on my arm because I love backcountry paddling. It is my most favorite activity in the world to do, other than be a podcaster and an entrepreneur. And it was her that came up with the name Inside My Canoehead. It stuck. When it wasn't doing well in the beginning, I thought about changing the name, and it was my eldest son who just kind of looked me straight in the face and said, "No way, Dad, no way. No way. You got to keep with this and believe in it. Believe in it. It will go somewhere." And my youngest son, who never once wavered in giving me high fives, even when I tried to be excited about the littlest thing, right? When I reached my first 100 downloads, I thought I won the freaking prize. The first 25 first 25 episodes that I released, you get this little podcast thing from Buzzsprout, and I shared it everywhere. And I tell you, my youngest son was there high-fiving, and all my family members, and to this day, who continue to like my content, subscribe to it, etc. Each and every one of you are an important part of this journey. I believe in what I'm doing here. I believe that the community needs it. I believe the information that we pass on is research and evidence-based, so it's not apocalyptic. The sky is not falling. We're not about to have World War III. We're not about to have societal collapse, but we are in for a pretty significantly challenging 2020s. And I hope the first 250 episodes that I've put out on this platform have provided some value to you. That 250 episodes worth of noise about subject matter very near and dear to my heart has been incredibly successful. That there's some nuggets of gold, as my old academic supervisor used to say. You're pulling out the nuggets out of there. Something made a difference. Something I said helped you through whatever challenge or difficulty you were having. I want to thank my editor for my first book. Sharon, you did a fantastic job. I was going to produce something that nobody would want to buy. And now that book is up and selling on Amazon. We have a second book up there on Amazon that is Preparedness Thoughts from Canada. It's 4 years of my writing put together in a print version. It's available for an ebook for $7 or a print version for $29, and it's in a big 8.5 by 11 book, so it's not one of those small ones that are hard to read. It's a big lap book, I like to call it. We've now produced a video course on how to adopt a prepared life, so if you're interested, that's over at preparednesslabs.ca. We've got some great products coming from the companies in the coming year. We just got some, we're just thrilled to be here. We've worked hard to get here. None of this was handed to us. We kept believing. I kept believing. People kept believing in us. And here we are. 250 episodes later, and we're in your living room, your car, wherever we may be. And I just wanted to end this episode by a heartfelt thank you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to us, to listen to the message that I have. Thank you for providing feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. If you think I'm full of it, people have told me that along the line, and I appreciate that because, every once in a while you might be right. We're all human. Keep it coming. Thank you for the privilege of occupying your time, your most valuable resource. Thank you for those that choose to support the podcast directly. And thanks again for listening, for being here, and hopefully I can help you rock your incredible life, chase your dreams, wrap yourself in a blanket of insulation so that when the next exogenous shock happens, you and your family will be ready to navigate it while everyone else is walking around, pointing their cell phones to the sky and wondering what's going on. So take care, stay safe.